Hey friends, welcome back to the channel. I am very excited to bring to you today's video. I want to attempt to make a segmented vase and a segmented bowl 100% with one tool and one tool only. And you guessed it, that is my Onefinity CNC. I haven't seen any videos on this, so I don't even know if this is possible. So I'm going to be kind of reinventing the wheel here. I'm going to jump in the easel, create my segments, glue them back together, and then I'm going to start running some tests. I'm probably just going to use some pine for all these tests to figure out if this is even possible. And then once I have a proof of concept, I'm going to break out the maple, the walnut, and the cherry. So I'm over here at the CNC. I've got my file running. This is just a larger board here that I decided to cut all of these out, but as you can see right there, I did not use enough glue, and when the segment popped loose, it got jammed up in there, and then the entire board moved. And you can see one by one here, this is just complete disaster. I'm actually pretty surprised at how well this 1/4-inch bit held up. It didn't break or anything, which is quite amazing, but you can see I lost a lot of segments here. So I'm going to go back to the drawing board, and I'm going to figure out a way to secure these a heck of a lot better. So I've got complete coverage now of tape on my sacrificial waste board and the back of the maple. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to squeeze out this CA glue over the entire surface, and I'm actually going to use a little putty knife to spread this around. This is some medium CA glue from Starbond. So you can see me spreading this around, and there's a couple of dry spots still. So I'm going to hit that with some more glue. And now I know I have 100% complete coverage with this glue, and that should stop any of these segments from popping free. I was a little bit nervous at first, so those first couple there on the left side that were cut, I was popping those out with my hand as they were being finished with their cut, but everything seemed to go well, so I did the exact same thing here with some walnut. You can see all these cut well, none of them moved, none of them shifted, so that 100% CA glue coverage trick worked. So if you guys are going to try this, make sure you have 100% coverage. So I am sitting here at the world's shortest desk with the most uncomfortable chair because it's time to start gluing these rings together. I popped these off of all the scrap pieces from the CNC, and I gave each edge a quick sand. You don't want any of those burrs or any of the fuzz that's left over there to directly impact the seating of all these faces. You need these seams to be as tight as possible. So you can just take a sanding block, something like this, and then just kind of scuff up the edge, and that'll take care of any of those burrs. But once you have them sanded, you can separate them into size. I've got them 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then the way I'm going to assemble these is I'm going to alternate them. I'm going to go walnut, ambrosia maple, walnut, ambrosia maple, till I get all 8 pieces. And then I have these rubber bands. I will leave a link in the description. These things are great. I think it was $2 for like 12 of these. Great value, so I'll leave a link for those. So now without further ado, I'm going to start gluing these up. So you want to make sure you have full glue adhesion on all of your faces. Once you start cutting these on the CNC, there's not going to be much left, just like if you do it on a lathe. So you want to make sure that whatever is left is fully glued to the piece next to it. Now you will be able to add some strength, because once you add a second ring on top of that, you're adding all that glue surface as well. But you don't want to screw around, you don't want to take any chances. So when you're gluing these, just make sure you have full glue coverage on these faces, and then you can just stick them together with the rubber bands, start forming your rings. So I'm just gluing these together. I'm making sure I got enough coverage on each side of the segment, and then just putting on these rubber bands. I'm going to push these down to my work surface here to ensure that the bottoms are flat, and that'll help later with the sanding. But just go through, glue them up, make sure you have adequate squeezing pressure there with those rubber bands. Everything should work out well. So here are all of my rings. I've got layer 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. I'm gonna let these dry up. I'm gonna give them plenty of time, probably way too much time. But once I pop these out of the rubber bands, I will then just flip them over on some sandpaper, sand the tops, and make sure that the top is perfectly parallel to the bottom. Can't wait to get these out of these and check out to see if this is gonna work. Fingers are crossed. So now it's everyone's favorite time, sanding. Not too big of a deal though. As you recall, when I pushed these against my surface of my desk, the bottoms should have been perfectly flat. So I'm just going through, I'm scuffing up the bottoms, just taking out any glue squeeze out, any sawdust that may be left on there. And then I just have to flip them over and do the same thing to the top. The tops were pretty close already, so that's not that big of a deal. So just going through here, doing some circular motions, that way I can get the most even sanding possible. Just going through here and going one by one and just sanding these up. Once you think you've got them sanded and everything looks good, both faces are clean and parallel, you move on to the next step. So while I was sanding, this gave me time to come up with a great way to try to find center of what would be basically a donut with these rings. There's no center, so that makes it a little bit difficult. But I decided to score a couple of lines here on a sacrificial waste board. I did a 90-degree crosshair, then I rotated that 45 degrees and cut them again. That should give me 8 lines that extend past the outside edges of my rings. And then I can center the bit right here where all these lines intersect. And then where these lines continue on, I'll just rotate my segmented ring to where the joints come together over those lines. And I should get perfect alignment with all my rings. So I've got those there. They're a little bit light, but I think you guys can see them. And here's one of my rings, and I'll just basically set that right on there and just line this up the best way that I can where all those lines intersect the joints there between the walnut and the ambrosia maple. And because I'm going to be using CA glue and tape, I'm going to have a little bit of time here to kind of twist this around and get this exactly right. So you can see I'm off just a tiny bit right there. So I'll just kind of turn that a little bit more. But I think this is a great way to find the exact center of these rings. Can't wait to start cutting. And speaking of cutting, here we go. My vase is 3.15 OD, so I'm cutting these inner rings at 3 1/4. That'll give me just enough room to get that vase in there. This inner portion is just with a 1/4 inch straight end mill. Once this finishes up, I will switch that over to a tapered ball nose, and I will Z off the top of this ring. That way I can get all of my Z elevation exactly as needed. But I will just clear out some of that sawdust, put in my tapered ball nose bit, Z off the top of my ring, and run my file. So this part was very exciting, starting to see the profile of these rings come together. Up until this point, I wasn't exactly sure if everything was going to work out correctly. But seeing this thing cut and seeing it cut correctly, this is giving me some hope. I'm getting pretty excited. Pulling off this outer skin is very satisfying. And then all it leaves you behind is this great looking ring with the profile. It is so clean. All those joints are so tight. Very excited. So I wanted to dress this vase up even further, so I decided to do a feature ring. You don't have to do one of these, but I wanted to, so I cut an extra ring, which would be my 6th ring, so it's dead center of this vase. I cut those pieces out of walnut exclusively, and then I'm going to come through here and I'm going to add some Padauk hearts. I'm just cutting the pocket right here with an 1/8 inch end mill. And I've got this piece clamped down pretty securely to my waste board. So this is just going to go through. I think this is actually real time here. So I think each one of these pockets is like 30 seconds or 32 seconds. Not quite sure, but once these all get cut, I'm going to switch over my material. I'm going to put down a 1/4 inch piece of Padauk down on my wasteboard right here. And I'm going to start cutting the hearts. So again, I'm going to have to go through, and I need 8 of these hearts. But just in case there's any kind of an issue, I'm going to cut 10 of these. That gives me a little bit of leeway. I can pick and choose which ones I like the best. Now I'm just going to knock out some of the sawdust out of the bottom of those pockets. Squeeze a little bit of glue in there. You don't need to go too crazy. Spread it around, and then I'm just going to take all of these hearts and just pop them in by hand and wipe off any of the excess glue squeeze out. You definitely want some squeeze out. That way you know you have full contact between your different species of woods here. Nothing too crazy here. Gets a little messy. No big deal. Now it's time to cut this feature ring. The inner diameter is the exact same, 3 1/4. On this one, I will not switch over to the tapered ball nose. I want the outside profile of this to be flat because my vase is going to taper up to this point. Then this ring will be flat on the outside perimeter, and then it will taper back down to a smaller diameter, which is where you will stick to the flowers right in the top of the vase. Very satisfying to see all these inlays come out beautiful. I also wanted to add an accent top and an accent base. So this one's going to be cut the exact same as my first ring. So I have that inner profile, and then I'm going to switch over to the tapered ball nose and do the outer profile. And then once these are getting ready to be glued up, I will actually just flip them over. So now I will have a little bit of a flare down at the bottom and then a little bit of a flare out at the top. So I've got all my rings laid out in order, so that way when I glue these together, I shouldn't have to figure out what piece goes where and which size is next. I'm very nervous to get this going. I don't want anything to shift on me. I don't want anything to move. The traditional way of turning one of these vases is you glue them up together raw. And then when it's on the lathe, you can do your final dimensioning, get your pattern, get everything just right, and you'll end up with a perfect finish. Doing it out of order, doing it here with the CNC where the rings are already cut to size, I can't allow anything to shift or move while I'm gluing it together. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to try something I've never done before. I'm going to use the CA glue and the wood glue method, to where I put a couple of drops of the CA glue and then a little bit of the wood glue, and the CA glue will act as a temporary clamp while the wood glue dries, and then once that's dry, everything should be good. This should give me just a little bit of time with the alignment just to make sure everything is lined up correctly and I get my pattern exactly how I want it. So I think I procrastinated long enough. Let's glue this thing up. Putting down the CA glue and the wood glue, and now I'm just setting my rings on here one at a time, cleaning out any of the squeeze out on the inside. I'm being selective here which part of all these rings that I like better or maybe don't like as much as some of the other sides. So I'm just setting them on there, squaring them up, making sure that the outsides all feel good, all feel right. There's no real big lips anywhere. If there's any defects in any of this ambrosia maple, there's a couple wormholes, I'll send that to the back of the vase. I just take my time going through here and gluing all these on. As you go higher and then toward the middle, there's more surface area, so it's a little bit easier to glue these on and get them to hold just right. And then as you get near the end, they start to get a little bit thinner and a little bit thinner. So it gets a little bit more scary, but just take your time, glue these on. Just hold it just right for, 10-15 seconds. It doesn't take much. So it is the next day. This has had more than enough time to dry. I hit this with a real quick light coat of sanding. I mean, I'm talking less than 5 minutes, guys. I used a random orbital sander and I just went from 120 up to 220. Didn't take long. If you do notice that you have a couple of gaps, maybe between your rings, you can fill that with a little bit of CA glue, and then when you sand it, that dust will get in there and mix with the CA glue and you'll have perfect filler. But this thing is awesome. It is smooth. I love the profile. I love the look. So I'm going to use some tung oil. Just put it on here real easy with the rag. This is just a wipe on finish. Real easy to do. So time to finish this with some finish. Love putting on the finish on these. The oil really brings out the beauty of the wood. Got that ambrosia maple, the walnut, the padauk. I'm taking care here to not spread the oil on the padauk and then over onto the maple, because it does tend to leave a little bit of a red tint in that oil. So I'm doing all the field and then I'm switching my rag over and doing just the padauk. I also want to make sure I do the inside of this vase, because it's going to have water pretty close to it. It will want to suck that up just like a sponge. So I just poured a little bit of oil in there, and then I'm just kind of spreading it around with my hand and letting gravity kind of do its thing. Moving it up and down, just making sure I get full coverage in there. Can't really stick my hand too far in there. Just wiping this off. Everything looks great, letting the oil drip out, and now I'm just trying to wipe down the inside the best that I can. You don't want to have this oil too thick. You just want to give it a nice even coat on the inside there. So putting this oil on the inside just ensures that the wood's going to all move the same, the outside and the inside. So this base piece here is basically just a pizza. It's 8 wedges glued together, and then I'm cutting the profile. The reason why this video is not very clear is I had my enclosure down. I didn't know quite if I could trust this 60-degree V-bit. It's 1 inch wide on a 1/4 inch shape, but everything worked out well. Just profile these bottom 2 layers, and once the profile is finished, I glued them together and then flipped it over and set it up right here, and now I'm just profiling the inside. You can start to see the shape come alive, and those clamps there on the front and back held this really secure. Everything worked out well. So here are the finished projects. You've got the segmented vase and the segmented bowl. These turned out awesome. I couldn't ask for anything more. I am incredibly happy how these turned out. I don't know if it was luck, but they worked out, so I'm gonna go with it. I originally had cut a bunch of these different cookies here to just determine, same kind of thing, if the angles and everything was gonna work out mathematically, and it all seemed to work out this way. So then I cut a whole bunch of these segments in the poplar and then glued this together. Once I figured out this was gonna work, well, it was time to go full scale. And this thing it's awesome. It's got some weight to it. It's got some heft to it. You can see on this top ring, it is still 3/8 of an inch. So you have plenty of wood thickness in here. This isn't gonna warp or twist or anything like that. Then I came over to the segmented bowl. This is out of cherry. And I love the way this looks. The great thing about the segments is that each one is cut from a slightly different piece of the wood, and you can actually, you know, if you had multiple pieces, get different pieces from each board and kind of interswap them together, and it just makes the grain, it makes everything about this wood, everything that makes the wood beautiful. It makes them pop out, it makes them stand out to the eye, and these are just awesome. I went a little bit thinner on the walls of this bowl here, just to make it feel a little bit lighter, give it a slightly lighter appearance. Everything worked out well. Again, I did all the math, I did all the figuring out, so you don't have to. So if you're interested in picking these up, grab the file down below and it will have everything you need. And it will have Amazon links for the vase, the rubber bands, and the bits. Those are affiliate links. They don't cost you anymore, but I will get a slight kickback from that. So it's a nice way to support the channel. But in the file, it will have all of the dimensions, the bits used, everything needed. So if you guys found this video at all helpful or entertaining, please give me a thumbs up. If you're interested in more CNC projects like this, I am pushing out all kinds of projects all the time. Hit that subscribe button so you don't miss anything. And until next time, take it easy.